Video going.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for coming out. A lot of big turnout. More than we had the first time I gave this talk. Just for recording. My name is Michael Neal. If you want to ever contact me or anything, I'm either BINULL on every server so that I can put in a screen name in, or it's just michael.neal@gmail.com with that. So I'm not going to set myself up too much here and get into the Kickstarter stuff because it might go a little long. I added more to this talk that I want to get into. So first of all, I'm just going to assume zero knowledge and what is crowdfunding, right? So crowdfunding is essentially taking a few dollars from a bunch of different people through the internet or local community or church or anything and raising it for a cause. Like a bake sale is crowdfunding, right? Just now that we have the internet, you can do it at a much larger scale and reach a much wider audience. What crowdfunding is not is investment, okay? So laws are changing. This might change somewhat in the future, but as of this moment, you're not buying investment in the company, a stake in the project. If you crowdfund a game or a movie, you don't have ownership to that game or movie, okay? You only generally get rewards that are processed. Now why Kickstarter? This whole talk is going to be Kickstarter specific. Kickstarter is the massive leader in all the crowdfunding sites. Rocket Hub and Indiegogo are popular ones that are up as well. You can go there. But Kickstarter is the only site that's all or nothing. You either get the goal, you raise the amount of money that you said you needed for your project, or you don't get anything. And I believe that's why Kickstarter is dominating, okay? Because there's a nice trust relationship between the backer and the project creator, okay? The creator is not going to be left in a position where they only got half the funds and then they have to figure out how to do half the project. And then as a backer, I know I'm never going to have to get half the project back. You're either going to have the funds you need to make the movie, or you're not going to make the movie and I'm not going to lose any money. And I think that's why Kickstarter is dominating in this space. Now, my own opinion is that Kickstarter is not going to continue to dominate in this space, and that we'll probably see over the next couple of years individual sites specialize in areas. So the one thing that I track the closest on Kickstarter with my passion is video game development. And Kickstarter does a really poor job for video game projects because, as we'll get into with the reward system, I may give you a reward of a t-shirt and the game for how much you backed, okay? So what's my delivery date? I only get to put down one. The month after I print the t-shirts, or 6 months later when the game's done. I only have room for one date. So I think there's a lot of space where Kickstarter could improve that, but then somebody else may come in and understand that better. So keep an eye out for that whatever you're interested in, there may be a smaller community, niche Kickstarter type site that's doing better. But if it doesn't have the all or nothing funding model approach, I don't think it'll be successful. Because like on Indiegogo, if they ask for $1 million and they raise 500, they get the $500. They can't build the warehouse or start the hackerspace with $500, but yet they'll get that money at the end, and I think that's what makes it not successful. Kickstarter basics is probably hard to see. Maybe not that hard. Maybe we'll get, well, alright. Yeah. Pointers on these things are never great. I should have brought my green laser pointer. Basically on your Kickstarter project, when you launch a, oh you've got it, yeah. When you launch it, this one we can see the beam. Yeah. Alright, so when you launch your Kickstarter project, you get a page similar to this. I didn't update the slide, they've tweaked it a little bit. Such as they've moved like this text down here. But basically you've got a short description, you've got a long description. You can have optionally down here an FAQ about your project underneath your description. Down the side you have the pledge levels. So when somebody backs your project, they can just give you $5. They can back you for $10 and then choose a $10 reward tier. If you ever tuned into PBS and you wanted to get the TARDIS mug that shows the TARDIS when it's hot and not when it's cold, you had to kick in $25 PBS for that, right? You want the NPR tote? That's like $75. That's serious money for the NPR tote. You do the same thing here. So you put your totes and your rewards and stuff in the pledge levels to try to, hey, give it a little more, kick it up a little bit. Up here we'll show the number of people who backed your project, what the total that you've raised are, and you can't really see that up there too, but there's the goal. It says 0 down here where there's no time left, but it will say like 22 days left. I get this big green thing here because I backed this project. I knew this indie game developer. He started out on the Xbox writing indie games for that channel, and all he wanted to do was keep his team together for a month and a half, pay salaries for a month and a half, so they could port it to PC. Everybody kept saying, port the game to PC, you want to buy a PC, you want to buy a PC. It's like, well, I can't really afford at this moment, because when he put the game on the Xbox, it was doing really well. He's got to wait, I think in his case it would have been 6 months before we would have started getting the money from the game, from Microsoft. And in 6 months, an indie team is going to be all over the place. It's going to be hard to bring them back in, head's not going to be in the right space, it's not worth it to do a PC port. So he went up, this is pre-Tim Schafer, Double Fine, $3 million project, and all he said was, if you guys really wanted to port to PC, tell me with your money, tell me with your dollars. On that, he asked for $3,000 and got 7. Right? So loud and clear, we want it on PC. And that was my first introduction to Kickstarter. That's when I kind of heard about it from Robert Boyd, Z-Boyd Games there, and Cthulhu Saves the World. Which, is, by the way, is a great JRPG classic throwback game. I backed it because I love the guy. I hate JRPGs. So I've only been able to play 15 minutes of the game. Alright. Enough. You guys probably all knew that. We're going to get into details here. My stats are from January 25th, 2013. So know that if you're watching the video 6 months from now, or after the apocalypse, if you've unearthed this video from some tomb, and you're like, those are wrong. This is a success rate from Kickstarter. These are Kickstarter's own stats by category. You might be able to read the names down there. Overall, the average is 44%, but you can see they vary greatly. Dance is always highly successful. Theater is highly successful. Music is highly successful. The ones everybody in this room might be interested in: technology, games, and design, which is where sometimes your iOS dock things fall under design, not technology. Those have a lower success rate generally than the average. But if you were to guess which ones were the popular category, where you're up against a bunch of projects, and which ones you had few projects to compete against, it would be the exact inverse, pretty much, of that chart. Funds raised per successful project. So again, there's not a lot of dance projects, so I'm dividing by a low number of total dance projects, but per project, design is kicking in $500,000. Dance is down there at the bottom, like, call that 300,000. I'm sorry, 30,000 for the average project rate. So you can see the design, the games, and the technology section. They're all the high bars. They're all the crazy. I don't even know what's up to anymore. I've lost track. I don't know if it's 13 or 14 million, and now the current reigning champ of most raised on Kickstarter. There was a project that was blowing up, and it was hitting like 10 million, and the project creators actually called Kickstarter and said, take it down. I don't know what to do with $13 million. Take it down. Stop. You know? So, this is interesting data. Funds raised. We're going to get a little more complex in the data, and it's going to get much, much crazier before the night's through. But this is a hackerspace. You guys can handle it. Funds raised for successful projects. All right? So this is the percentage of projects and where they kind of landed in 1,000, 1 to 9, 10,000, 20,000. These are Kickstarter's numbers here. But the big spike in all these projects that are going up, with the exception of design, games, and technology again, is the $1,000 to $10,000. So the majority of projects are getting $1,000 to $10,000. They're asking for that, and they're getting that of the successful ones. And then this is an interesting stat too from Kickstarter. These are failed projects, and what percentage of their goal did they get to, right? So their time ran out, they didn't get the money, just all ended happy, nobody gets money, nobody gets billed, and they're free to submit again. This big bar here is the 1 to 20%, and that first bar is 0%. You can kind of see lined up there. Just staggering that 20-something% of projects don't even get a pledge, right? You can do better than that, right? You can get a pledge. You put some effort into it. That is literally going in there late at night, making a webcam video, filling out the page and hitting submit and not even tweeting it, right? You didn't get $1, okay? So that's 20% of the projects. And then most of them are done between 1 and 20%, which says, hey, the bulk of the projects are off in some major way. It's obvious when somebody comes to that page, this isn't even worth backing. They're not coming in close to the finish line. They're not coming in 60, 50%. They're dying under 20%.
Could you briefly explain how you pulled your data, the numbers?
I did not. These are Kickstarter's data.
Okay, so do they get it in like tabular form, or is there an API?
There's a grid. There is a page on Kickstarter /help/stats. You can drill down to and see all these numbers. I put them into pretty charts.
Okay.
It's a one-page grid of numbers.
Great.
But what you're implying to, that's not enough for me. Those numbers are pretty useless. Those numbers don't tell me why are 20% of these projects, why is that number so high that they're failing under the 20% mark? I can't use that. I can't take that back and improve and do something with my Kickstarter. So I have been screen scraping Kickstarter. I'm sorry. I have been using the HTML API that Kickstarter provides to collect data and monitor projects for a year and a half now. It's quite a database. It's over 4 gigs. It has to be run on a 64-bit system now to access and play with the data. Anybody that wants the data, shoot me an email. I'll set you up a link. You can download it. I share it. I just don't have it hosted normally because it's going to be a 400, 500 megabyte zip file to download, and I don't want to get dinged with bandwidth or somebody come after me, because of that. So I'll put it up. You can grab it and then go play with it. It's in Microsoft SQL Express format, so you can get SQL Express for free. And no, I am not porting it to Linux or MySQL or whatever it is that you want to analyze it in. You get to do that. It's 4 gigs. It takes a while to play with. So, before I get into my data set, I want you to know the difference between my data and what Kickstarter reports. Kickstarter reports 80,900 something projects, and I have 78,900 something projects. So, I'm missing 2,000 projects, okay, from their database. You might say, well, that's close enough, right? It doesn't quite work that way. When you break it down, these are the successful projects. So since Kickstarter puts numbers up on successful projects, I can run those numbers myself and compare the differences. Kickstarter said there were 1,000 successful dance projects. Well, how many successful dance projects do I have in mind? And I can go up here and I can see I'm missing 0.1% of the dance projects, and I can even break it out in terms of funding range. This might not be 100% accurate now because Kickstarter opened in the UK recently, and I don't know how they're converting pounds to dollars. I don't know at what point do they do that conversion for their data, so that little money side of it could be fudged a little one way or the other, just depending on how you do the conversion rate. So the biggest chunk, I'm just missing 3% of the $100,000 to $900,000, which is kind of weird that I'm missing that, but that could be like 2 projects, percentage-wise, all right? That's pretty good. But the real story is in the failed projects I'm missing. Kickstarter does a lot of things to hide failed projects. They will post their stats, and they'll tell you the stats of them, but if you go to Kickstarter and search Knoxville, I know of 3 projects that were launched in Knoxville that failed that will not come back in your search results. If you type in the exact name of the project, then they'll come up and they'll have the Knoxville flag on them. Okay? So Kickstarter does a lot of things like that. They also put no follow and no index on the project so that Google will purge them from the index. Right? They do a lot so that if you go to Kickstarter and just start searching around, you're either seeing successful projects or you're seeing projects in progress, okay? But they kind of hide the failed projects. It seems to me that that's intentional. I can't prove that, so that's just a hypothetical. But what does that mean for my database? What that means for my database is, in total, I'm missing somewhere between 2 and 5% of the failed projects for any given category. Thus, my numbers will be slightly inflated when compared to Kickstarter's numbers. So I'm only going to compare my numbers to my own numbers from here on out, but just know my entire data set has a slight inflation because of those 2,000 projects that I'm missing, the majority of them are failed projects. And if they never had a pledge, and they never had a backer, it's almost going to be impossible for me to find that in that system, right? Those last 2,000 projects, if nobody backed them, and that person who launched the project never backed another project, then there's no pages linking to or from that project, and the search engine is not going to return it. So I just don't have a good way to find that. But I've done a lot of crazy things to fill in those links and get it down there, like going to the Internet Archive, using Google Cache, doing everywhere I can do to tease out URLs. For all intents and purposes, though, for the rest of the data of the presentation, though it's skewed, I don't think it matters for what I'm going to cover. All right, so the first question, you can have a video at Kickstarter. Does that help you? Well, this is the baseline in my world, which is just slightly over the 44% Kickstarter. This is projects, the success rate of projects with video, and the success rate of projects without video. I don't know if it's right to say that having a video helps you, but not having one clearly hurts you. This is not a judge on the quality of the video. Even the guy with the webcam gets counting these stats because I have no way of measuring quality of the video. But you can see right now, you need to have a video. Oh, go ahead.
One other question. A few months back, I recall there being some more requirements for posting a project on the site. I couldn't remember, was video one of them? Do you have to have like a working product now, like not a mock-up, but like an actual prototype?
There are additional requirements per categories.
Okay.
So if you go to the technology category and you're manufacturing something, then you have to submit manufacturing and builds, but those are not applied to all categories.
Okay.
So like, I don't have to have a prototype for a video game.
Okay. So videos are also optional for...
Yes, videos are optional. Now, you could get into specific cases where they'll say, no, you're going to have to provide something. And they do it on a case-by-case basis of just where they feel, not so much fraud, but just misled investors.
Sure.
You know, like the creator themselves were unaware of what it's going to cost to manufacture a product, and the backers were unaware of what that was a concept art, not a reality. So they got involved there, but that was limited to those cases only.
Didn't they, I saw something about changing the structure where they changed the structure where you can't do multiple rewards. You can't have like stacked rewards anymore for some reason.
As far as I know, the rewards, you're just limited to the text that you put in the reward box. I'm still seeing today one that say, like, you get everything at the levels below you.
Yeah.
Now, backers have only ever been able to pick one reward tier. There's a lot of Kickstarter projects that direct people to a PayPal site, and it's like, if you want to do that and that or something, you can go to PayPal and we'll marry it up later. I don't think they restrict anything on that.
Okay. Well, I've seen something on Kickstarter just recently.
I know I just backed one that gave me cumulative rewards a few days ago. So, and again, sometimes those are very, very category specific. You know, it's like, hey, we're just trying to solve this problem that's happening in theater, and they don't blanket apply. I give them credit for doing that. This is where charts got changed into much more deep analysis charts. After I gave this first project, I started data mining up, down, sideways, every which way I could, finding more points, more interesting data sets to look at, and what mattered and what didn't. So this one here is showing you for the days the project was open. So you can go up to 90 days. at one point, I think you may only go up to 60 now. I don't know if 90 is an option anymore. You used to be able to go at least up to 90 days with your project, and you could start from 1 day. You can have a 1-day project. The baseline is the average success rate of all projects, and then the dots are plotting the success rate of projects that were at $80, 80 days. That's their success rate for the number of projects. So basically just doing a quick scatter plot and then throwing a regression on it. And what comes out of this is between 6 and 34 days is a really nice sweet spot. Okay? So 6 and 34 days, so about a month. You know, give yourself a week to a month. We're not taking into account funding levels asked for or anything like that in that chart. So a 6-day project could have been asking for $50 most of them, you know. But 6 to 34 days is significantly higher above the baseline, the red line. So anytime the blue line's over the red line, you're doing better than the average, and anytime it's under, you're doing worse. Next, I delved into gold, and this pretty much panned out exactly like I expected. The more money you ask for, the harder it is to get that money, right? The cross point is around 6,000, 7,000 when you cross that inflection point. So I just took it back a little bit and said, well, all right, let's call it like 4,500, less 5,000, 4,500, or under, right? You have a very high success rate above the average. If you're only looking for less than 5,000, you start to go above 5,000, now you're sweeping down. And again, success rates are very low when you start getting into $100,000, $300,000 projects. Of course, those are the ones that make news. So it might be a little misleading because all you see in the news is these projects that ask for $100,000 and then got 300, 400, a million. You know, they got funded. You might think like, oh, I just asked for that. Well, no, most of those, only 5% are in this. 95% are failing, right? At that level. Just know that that was pretty obvious. This one was not obvious. This one I didn't expect, okay? This is the number of pledge levels that you offer. Just the number of options. You know, do I give you 3 options? Do I have 7? Do I have 25? And I didn't expect this. But you see this very strong correlation, about 1 to 10 here, where the more options you give somebody, the higher success rate you have. And it's a strong jump in correlation there. This is one thing I like about playing with the numbers, is, you know, numbers for the most part don't lie. You just use them wrong, right? So, you know, I said this is like, all right, you at least want to have 7, if not 10, reward tiers as you go down. I'm going to talk more about reward tiers later, as far as like ideas for them and what you can do with them. But you want to have several, okay? Maybe it's just a legitimacy thing. You know, when somebody comes in and they see you have 10 different rewards, you've obviously thought through this. All right. This was a chart that, oh yeah, there it goes. All right, come on. Sometimes this, see if I start back up. PowerPoint starts wigging out on these charts. I'm going to completely wig down on this one. Alright, I'm going to attempt. Oh, look at that. Java wants to update, guys. that killed us right there. Alright, let's go back. Current slide. Let's see. Okay, this is descriptions. So the column you can't see down here is percentages again. That's our baseline. And this is the length in HTML characters, because that's just the way my database is. I've got the HTML description. So I didn't try to tease out the words from that and get a word character length, because for the purposes of analysis, it's pretty much the same. But basically, you want to get over 4,000 HTML characters in your description, right? After that, it doesn't seem to make a difference. That line flattens out. But up until that point, you haven't told me enough about your project, right? So you do want to write a good 4,000 HTML characters, not necessarily... Also, that includes the about text. because like I said, they moved that into the description now, so your short line description is counted in that as well. This one is by FAQ length. So like I said, you could have a description, you could also at the bottom have an FAQ. There was a slight down point for not having an FAQ, right? If they didn't have one at all. If they had an FAQ, it didn't really seem to matter how long or how many questions they answered, but it looked like having an FAQ was advantageous. Which if you've written a good 2,000 word description, right, to get to your 4,000 HTML character description, coming up with an FAQ version, that should be pretty easy. You should be able to just take it back out and just give like a bullet point version of that. Alright, so here's the money chart. Here is showing the money chart. What if we looked at projects $500 to $5,000, 6 to 34 days, 7 or more pledge levels, greater than 3,500 HTML characters in the description, they have an FAQ of at least 500 characters or more, and they have a video, their success rate goes up to almost 75% versus our baseline down at 44%. Now, caveat, that's only 2,000 projects, 2,200 projects matched all those criteria. But if you have a project, you can do it. You can kickstart for a month. You can ask for 5,000 or less. You can work your project into that. You should be doing it, right? The odds are 3 out of 4 of those are getting funded. Okay. So that's the real takeaway here. Just for fun.
What was the other? There were 2.
The other is the baseline. The other is the average of all projects. Just for fun, this one breaks out those 2,200 projects. So as you can see, by category, the orange bars are the total number of projects in that category that matched. So you can see music here almost had 500 of those 2,200 projects, right? So making a CD for $5,000 seems to be a successful Kickstarter venture. If you've got a band and you're going to do that. The blue bar here is the ideal success rate, which you can see that dance of that criteria has a 100% success rate. So if you want to make Hackerspace the musical, and you can do it for $5,000, go to it. You virtually cannot fail. But it's also worth noting on the red bars, those are the base success rates, and there was a 70% success rate for dance anyway, right? That's probably a very tightly knit community. Right? People who are going into that, or who are into dance, or if they're sharing with each other, they know each other already, they're helping each other out, those kinds of things. So, I mean, because the number of projects was 25, 30, that's pretty low in dance. So, here's the design mark. Ideal was getting up to 80% for design, for video games, or for games. Games includes board games and video games. Games is a little bit over 70%, and then technology projects was almost up to 80%. And those saw some pretty good jumps. And that's because those are crowded categories, but there's also a lot of people that are just trying to, think they can go in and it's easy money. It's like, if I go in here and I do a Kickstarter, I'll get money. Phase 1, get on the internet. Phase 2, phase 3 profit. That's what they think. Alright, so here's the average funding levels for the ideal project. So the last chart I got up here before I'm going to get off of data and into some software stuff. So what you're looking at here is, of those 2,200 projects per category, what was the average funding level they got to? So of course they're all going to cross the bottom line of 100%. But you can see that there's some good spikes on design, games, and technology where they ended up well over 500% of their goal. So they're going in asking for $5,000 and getting 2, 3, 4, 5 times that amount. They're getting, $2,500 or $25,000 when they ask for $5,000. You can't bank on that. That would be disingenuous to go in there and like, okay, well, we need $15,000 to fund this. Let's ask for 5 and pray for $1,500 because you'll get that $5,000. And Kickstarter's terms of service says you are legally obligated to deliver on whatever you promise. So in that reward box, not in the description, but in that reward box, Kickstarter says like you're supposed to deliver that, right? I have misgivings about the way they word that. It's like, well, if you're really doing Kickstarter, projects can fail. And saying that you have to legally deliver that makes it sound like pre-orders in a store now, which it is not. So, but that's what they say.
Who has standing to sue you, Kickstarter or?
Kickstarter has said that they will not follow up, but your backers could sue you.
Do you give enough contact information for them to bring an action?
Yeah. Yeah, you do. And they will link it. I think they have to also not only collect the information from you, but they link like a Facebook account or something with you as well. There's a whole little about you bio profile that people can dig into.
And do you know if there have been any such suits by the?
I don't believe that there have been any.
Mhm.
Now, I do know that if you back a Pebble watch, you're probably angry. I've also backed a project called Code Hero that went dark for like 6 to 8 months and just had no updates. And there was talk in the comment thread on Kickstarter of, hey guys, got an email address, we're talking about maybe a class action thing or something, send an email here when we're talking. In both of these cases, it spurred the creators to come out like, oh, we've been dark, we've got this, here's new software, here's new builds. So I think the system is pretty much working. You know, like, we don't need the lawyers involved, but that threat, when the angry mob starts to form, and they just like, oh, we just fell off the internet for a while because we got really busy because, you know, we're doing this big project, and let you know. Most Kickstarter projects are late, by the way. Most Kickstarter projects are going to deliver late. So when you go in there, whatever you think your delivery date is, push it out. Because even that, you're going to miss. I don't have the stats on that, but I wasn't, that's not easy to collect. Somebody else did that by, like, interviewing and things like that.
Are there conventions on what people do with the excess funds if the project is funded over 100%?
Stretch goals is usually the convention. So once you get over funding, and you have 15 days left, you say like, well, I asked for $5,000. If I get to $7,500, then I will be able to do this or offer this thing. Up until the Kickstarter closes, you can change your pledge amount and you can change your reward tier. So I backed a project late last year. Should get it in the mail here very shortly. This woman, she looked really young, but it turned out like, no, she's a college graduate. She just has one of those, she looks 12. She made precision machined dice out of aluminum. And the pips were drilled to such a depth on each surface that the dice was in perfect balance still. Okay? So these were flawless as you could get dice. And it was kind of like, well, that's kind of cool. And, you know, you see a female engineer, and that's always, you'll see later, that's a soft spot. Got 3 daughters, right? So, like, you know, female engineering, and I'm like, yes, here is $15. I would buy a pair of dice. I actually spent $30 and bought 2 pairs. I gave one to my oldest daughter and one to my wife because they both play D&D. Unfortunately, she was only doing 6-sided die, and she was like, I don't know, you know, let me get this done, guys, because like the threads were nothing but like, hey, these are the standard dice set. You have to make them all. So her stretch goal was Damocus steel. So when she got funded to her level, right? She hit her goal, and she hit her first goal, which was tungsten. Okay? So now these dice, I chose anodized aluminum because, you know, like I'm not going crazy on a set of dice. She did tungsten. If you don't know what Damocus steel is, I'll just tell everybody so you don't have to raise your hand in here. How about that? Since it's a hackerspace, so you may not admit. Damocus steel is where they take steel and you fold it and you hammer the crap out of it, you fold it, you hammer the crap out of it, you fold it, you hammer the crap out of it, until you make this really dense, compact steel that has awesome little curvy, wavy lines. That's what they made samurai swords out of, right? And that's where you get that arc and that look and all that. So she found a supplier that was going to be able to do that, and so she said, like, okay, I forget what the initial Kickstarter fund was, like $1,000 or $2,000. Like, this is dice. You know, she just wants to make these. She found a place that'll make them. She's like, hey, $2,000, I'm not making a business out of it, so we'll make these dice. Sounds really cool. And then she was getting up to like the 10,000 mark. It was getting really popular. And she said, all right, guys, we get to 15,000, I can do Damocus steel. And she did that. So that's normally what people do once they go beyond. All right.
Have you drilled
Oops.
down based on gender or age of the,
I don't have that data just by screen scraping. I would have to then start going through and attempting to find Facebook links of the creators, and maybe they share that data there or something. I don't have that. So now I'm going to shift out of stats, and I'm going to, obviously, if I've been this deep in stats and I'm backing a ton of Kickstarter projects, I think I've backed 20. Because I honestly just like supporting people. I'm not so much like, oh, you know, I really want that. You're making something I want. It's generally like, you seem enthusiastic, you seem like you had a good idea, and if I'll give you $10. Just $10, go have a shot at, you know, whatever thing it is that you want to make, whatever project. And I honestly don't ever care if it succeeds or fails. You know, I just kind of like it, so that's usually why I back. So in there, I kind of have some ideas of what makes a good project. And the first thing is that it's a right fit for Kickstarter. And I keep saying the word project, but that is key. Okay? It is a project. It is not a company. It is not an organization. You don't Kickstarter hackerspace. Okay? You kickstart a project that hackerspace is making. You kickstart the boat, right? But you don't kickstart the space, right? Those don't do well. You want to have a project. And also, you kind of want to have a project that, if it gets funded, you can take the time, execute on it, and kind of be done with it in 6 months to a year. Okay? You know, it's got to be something that kind of fits nice into that. Not a multi-year, you know, thing or something like that. So it needs to be a right fit for Kickstarter. And it needs to be consumer focused. Because those are who are backing it. It's just the general internet, the internet at large, but pretty much it is consumers. So while I may be backing just because I like the spirit of entrepreneurship that it represents, most people are backing because they want the game. Or they want that movie made. They want a set of dice. So it should be consumer focused. If you're on there, there was a project in Knoxville called Firelight. It was either Firefly or Firelight. And it was a solar-powered light system that could go in easily into places like a porta potty, right? Because you don't want to go to the porta potty at Bonnaroo in the dark. You may not want to go to the porta potty at Bonnaroo in the light, but you definitely don't want to go to it in the dark. And so it was like these solar-powered lights, had a little light sensor on there, you know, charged during the day, lighted up during the night, right? They can mass-produce them. They got companies that are interested in them. It's like, hey, we need to get this first run done so we can get the company started, and it failed. It's not a consumer-focused product. Now, if they had taken that product with a business idea, but then also thought, like, where does an average consumer need a solar-powered light that, you know, could do on this? And just imagine having a solar-powered light up in your attic. You don't have to find the switch or where the bulb's at or the bulb's blown. There's always a solar-powered light in my attic. There's always light in the attic. You know, LEDs, they'll last forever. It's going to last a good 5 years up there coming on at night. Right? No power, no anything. That would have been an awesome Kickstarter project, and they could have done both. So think consumer focused with your project. And even if that means changing it up a little bit. Good video. I'm going to go in depth into the video in a second. We already said to have video on there, but I think good video is key. I can't tell you the number of projects. As soon as I hit play on that video, I was closing the browser page, it was done. A simple description, okay? Now you have about text that can go for days. That first paragraph, right? You got to sell me on the concept then and make it simple. And I know you're a special, unique snowflake, and you're unlike anything that has ever happened before. But give me the elevator pitch and tell me it's like when Harry Met Sally beats Battlezone. Boom. Okay, now I got the pitch for your game, right? Or maybe at least have enough to go, wait, what did you say? I'm interested. Okay, that's the point. One of my hobbies, you know, when I like to go off and niche in a hobby like photography or painting, you know, something I'm not good at. I just like to immerse myself in it until I get okay at it. One thing I did was songwriting. And when I was deep into, you know, what makes a good song and analyzing song structure and all that, the most important lyric to your song is not the chorus. It's the opening 2 lines, right? The opening 2 lines determines whether you turn it off the radio or you keep listening. Do I set up a story in those first 2 lines, or they go away. My example, and apologies for language here, but this example is in the song. And it's the one that always comes to mind. There's a live on their V album, their 5th album, whatever that one's called. There's a song where it starts off, light up a cigarette, she said, and calm the fuck down. And right there, what's going on here, you know? You're boom, she's telling you to light up a cigarette, calm down, something, you know, it's like, I'm in for the song. You've got me now, I'm in. So having a simple, short description at the front that kind of sets up what it is about and explains it to me is key to get me to read the rest. And then last, I'm going to talk about proper rewards, how to do your reward tiers, what works, what doesn't. I'm sorry. And last, I'm going to talk about raising awareness for your project. Okay. Video, think of doing it in 3 acts. Like I talked about the simple description, Act 1, prototype. Show it to me. Show me the wooden version of whatever you're building. Show me the mock-up. Show me the paper craft. Show me the prototype build of the video game. You're doing 2 things. 1, you're making me see it. I know what it is. 2, you're proving to me you can do it. You've done it. I have a wooden, robot guy, and he's got like 1 servo and 1 arm moves. Like, okay, you're going to be able to build a whole walking robot now. You can do the basics. You can show me a prototype, right? And you need to be at that level. Right? Don't just come in with the idea. Come in and you can show me something physically. Then, after that, tell me your story. Okay? The toy manufacturers, Mattel, whatever, they're making robots every week, right? Why are you different from Mattel? Well, it's your story. Believe it or not, your story makes you unique. I want to hear about, as a kid, I was really into rock and sock robots, and I always wanted to have one that could get off the stage and walk around and punch each other. This is really like, my story to that. That's what makes you unique, and that's what will get somebody like me to back, but it's also what will get somebody to jump up in levels, right? Because that whole hipster, I was there first, I knew them when thing starts kicking in. If I like your story, if I hear your story, and I'm like, man, this person's going somewhere, like they're smart, they get it, they're locked in, they're a part of the community. Now I want to back you to get the t-shirt. That proves, it's like, yeah, I backed him when he was, I backed her when she was just making dice on Kickstarter, Now she's leading manufacturing and steel dice accessories or something, So, Act 3, your story. Act 2, your story. Act 3, money use, caveat, you may want to just cut it completely. So, Act 3, tell me what you're going to do with the money. If you think that's going to add. Okay? It's like video games. I'm very fond of video games. I constantly tell developers, don't talk about what you're going to do with the money with the video game. Because all money in a video game goes to pay a person. Bid for a license of some software, and that software's licensed and done in perpetuity, never have to come back to it. All video games are made by time, right? You don't have to go out and buy assets. I have a computer, I can make a video game, right? Telling me that you need a few $1,000s to take an extended vacation from work is going to make me like, well, what's you so special? I want to take an extended vacation from work, right? It's not good, it's not adding to your story. If, however, you're making a movie and you're going to need fisheye lenses, and you're going to need a special red camera to shoot it in 4K or whatever, like, I can relate to that. Like, oh yeah, that stuff's beyond reach of the average person. You're going to need money to make that happen. If you have a lot of physical asset costs, like in the case of the dice in the Damocus steel, that's not cheap. That's not something anybody can just get their hands on. That just makes it like, oh yeah, that's great. And in that case, it adds to it, and it also tells me you've researched into this. You've told me I know what it's going to cost for me to get the materials to make this project happen. Okay, I cost it all out. This is where Kickstarters actually come in for like technology and manufacturing, and require that plan to be submitted that says, no, this agency quoted me this guy quoted me this guy quoted me this, if here are the sum parts, if I order in these quantities, I'll get this rate, therefore the Kickstarter will be a success. Comedy. You might be funny among your friends. You probably are. They'll be jokes. Don't laugh. The difference between funny in a circle of friends, funny at the party, and being a stand-up professional comedian is a mountain of experience, okay? Nothing kills a Kickstarter video like some bro humor, or some inside jokes, or some stuff you just say, repeat because it's funny to you, right? If you're going to go down a comedy route, commit to getting some honest feedback. And that means people you don't know, showing them your pitch video, standing behind glass or away from them and watch them not laugh at it and be willing to cut it. Because if you're unfunny, it doesn't play well, okay? It just looks like, hey, these guys are making some bro humor jokes. They're making them because they're mocking that whole bro culture, but it doesn't come off that way. It comes off like they're a couple frat boys screwing around, and now I don't want to give them any money because I don't trust that they're going to be handling it well. I don't think I have a thing up there for it, but be honest. And be honest with the people you put in front of the camera. I can tell you within 10 seconds if that person is involved in the project or a spokesperson. And one of the biggest giveaways is when all of a sudden a woman is up there talking, and I can tell she's reading the teleprompter, and I go to the About project, and I go to the company, and I don't see any women employed. And at that moment I realized, okay, so you hired a model to come in and read your tech stuff because you thought that would get my money? Done. Over. You violated trust. You're not honest with me, right? You tried to pull some slick sales stuff, and it's going to backfire. And then it backfires quite a bit on Kickstarter because somebody may not catch it, 2 or 3 people may not catch it, but when the 5th person catches it, they leave a comment. And then everybody else goes, oh, you're right. Yeah, that doesn't add up at all. Even to the point on the sexism thing, where I've seen video games where people have pitched video games that would pass any AAA studio's muster. And they're like, oh yeah, that's exactly what the female shape looks like. That's what we make all our games look like when we're shipping it out there. And I have seen the backlash going, I would love to back a science fiction role-playing game. That sounds awesome. I will not back it with your characters drawn that way. And I've seen the project taken down and redone with the model, and I was like, wow, that's really impressive. So be honest, you know, in everything you do. Just be straightforward and honest, because you are asking people to give money with the risk there may not be anything at the end of it. All right, let's talk about reward levels. $10, these are Kickstarter numbers. $10 is the most popular pledge level, but $25 is the most popular reward tier chosen. Okay? There's a lot of pledge levels, I guess, but they don't choose a reward. You don't have to choose a reward, and you don't have to have a reward at any particular level. What this to me says, though, if you can do it, if it'll work for your project, have a $10 reward and have a $25 reward that is a kick-up. If you're a video game developer, okay, $10 I think is a fair and reasonable price to ask for your game, especially on Kickstarter. So $10, get the game, DRM free, here you get the game. $25, here comes the digital art, here comes the digital soundtrack, here comes, you know, a collector's edition digitally. I'll explain why digitally in a bit, but try to have a nice, like, understand that most people are going to come in and want to pay $10. That's going to be the immediate, like, go-to amount. Like, I'm going to back you, I'm going to give you $10. Try to find a reason to upsell them to $25, because that's the most common rewards here they click on. So if they're liking your story and they like that, and then they look over and they see, like, oh, there's this little cool thing you'll do for $25 that, you know, kicks up. Do it. Raising awareness. Obviously, social networks. You already have a large social network, and with your social network, you should be priming the pump. It should not be news the day your Kickstarter launches that you're working on one. Everybody in your social circle should know you're launching one. You should go to MailChimp and create a mailing list and get all your friends to agree to be on it, so you can send it out immediately, so they can back it immediately, even if it's $1 or $2. You know, come on, you can get mom to pitch $5 in. You know, so leverage social networks, leverage friends and family, and that's, you know, get off of zero at the beginning, right? So when the masses come in, they don't see your project sitting at nobody's pledged, right? Because if one thing, nobody likes to back the failed project. Nobody likes to be the guy who like gave the first money in and took all the risk. They like to see like other people have been backing this, so okay, it seems to be good now. There's an inertia to that. So the people you know you're good for it, and you know you're good for it, get them in there first. Local media could be a big help. Okay? Knox News Sentinel, Metro Pulse, really the same, but you know, Oak Ridge, you know, any local newspaper. There's a blurb. There's something. I mean, we're at the point where news during the ice stuff that happened last Friday, I was watching WHEE's coverage of Facebook and Twitter. That's really all they were doing, just nonstop reading tweets and sharing pics and things like that from Twitter. So the bar is lower in local media. That hey, go, you know, you're making this thing. You got a good story. You got your pitch video together. You know, get them involved. Okay, they may not want to cover you at launch. They may want to let you launch for a bit and get up there. So don't expect them to do like a big like, hey, you can go to time and launch thing. But give that 30-day window and maybe you can get some local media coverage. Now, news sites, internet coverage, larger media coverage. It's worth sending your story out. Don't expect to get any coverage. There's been a giant backlash against Kickstarter by a lot of the mainstream press and bloggers who are influential and things like that because they got bombarded by it. And everybody bombarded by it and spammed them. Hey, talk about my project, talk about my project. Hey, we put my project on TechCrunch. We put my project on TechCrunch, you know. And finally, they just actually set up rules. Most of them will happily tell you, if you have the word Kickstarter or link in your email anywhere, it goes right to the trash. I don't want to see anything about it. I don't want to deal with anything about it. So you may get some news site coverage, but it's going to be pretty much after you're already successful and you don't need it. You might have some niche news sites that might be interested in covering it. So still try, but just don't expect a lot to come from the mainstream media. Now, the tier under that, the bloggers who are just like you and I, they just blog on their passion. They may cover it. They may, you know, take a look and get all that. So if you want ahead of time, put together a list of people who are blogging that would blog whatever it is you're creating, you know. So like a lot of indie game developers post blogs up where they kind of post thoughts about other games they're playing. It's a pretty common thing. See an indie game developer making comments on what they would do differently or how this is interpreted or what's great about this game or that game. They may talk about you. They may, you know, because they see themselves one day wanting to do the same thing. So that's worth contacting. The last one you got to be very, very careful with. You have to do it in the correct manner, but going to forums can also be a good source. I recommend, if you're not a regular member of that forum, that, you know, of course you sign up and you make an account. I don't recommend you start making a bunch of fake posts that act like a community member for a little bit and then post. Again, go back, be honest. But I do recommend you get there, you make an account, you find out who the moderators are, and then you approach the moderators and you say, hey, I'm doing this Kickstarter. I think it's valuable to the people who read your forums. I would like to post a bit about it in your forums. Is that appropriate and how should I do that? And then the administrator may tell you, no, we don't like that. But they also may just tell you, yes, that's okay. Please go to the off-topic forum and post it here with this header. Okay? You've got a blessing of the admin. You're cool. You have no internet kerfuffle that happens and blows up because you were bad, you know, on there. Because remember, everybody who's pledged can pull, right? So if you have a big, massive scare of like, oh no, it's not going to happen, they can all go in there and cancel their pledges. And you can go from being funded to not. All right, let's talk about costs. Because this gets overlooked a lot. All right, these numbers come from the Banner Saga video game, which raised $720,000 for their game. 10% of that money either went to Kickstarter, Amazon, or failed charges. So just take your amount and take 10% off the top. It either went to fees or credit cards that got declined, and you're not going to get that money. They ended up giving away $22,000 in prizes. People who pick posters, people who pick shirts, people who pick buttons, right? So that added up to $22,000 in hard costs. But that's okay. You figured out, like, hey, it cost me this much to buy a button, and I can make sure that I'm going to get that. The kicker, they also spent $22,000 in shipping. Okay? If you actually get as successful as the Banner Saga, the Federal Post Office goes, no, we don't do that. Right? If you have to ship that much and that many boxes, you have to go into the post office service and sit down at a desk and negotiate a contract now. Okay? You just can't ship 30,000 packages through the post office. Okay? Also, they noted $10. A lot of times you see this. Add $10 for international shipping. That is not enough, and you will lose in the long run on that. Okay? So you just may want to say, hey, and you'll pay international shipping costs. This is one of the areas where I think Kickstarter doesn't do so hot. Because if they want the $25 reward tier, you tell them in the $25 reward tier that $25 gets you your button and covers shipping in the US, continental US only. Please add an extra amount based on this equation, or go to this site to figure out what it'll cost to ship to your region. There's nothing in Kickstarter to force them to pay that, right? So I don't know, because I'm not on the back end of these projects, I don't know how you handle the international guy who didn't pay for international shipping. I think technically you're okay, because if you put it in the text of the reward that he had to add that, you could say like, well, go to PayPal and give me $15 and I will ship you the reward. Could be a sensitive thing. So I do see a lot of projects that just flat out say, sorry, I'm not shipping internationally. I'm not set up to handle that. Taxes. If you don't do anything, it's income, right? And if it's income, that counts Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. If you've never contracted for yourself, that's 19.8 off the top. You don't get that back. Okay, 19.8% comes off the top. You get none of that back as an independent, right? It's not that bad on your check because your company's paying half that amount. Then you start talking about income tax. And that's where you fill out brackets and have deductions and everything. That 19.8 is gone off things. So if you do nothing, it's going to fall into income. You're going to lose 30% of those funds. Gone. Taxes. Thing is, you should only be paying taxes on profit. Okay? You should never pay taxes as a company, as an institution, on money that was spent buying raw assets or spent hiring someone. Okay? Those are costs. You only pay on profit. Also, you should only be paying taxes when you ship. Okay? So, you collect all that money. You should have yourself set up on an accrual-based system. So it's like, wait a minute, I don't ship these rewards to the end of the year or next year, so I don't pay taxes on this. Not until I ship. And that way, if I have more cost than I expected, well, then I have less profit at the end. And I would love to say, you know, if you do it right, you don't have a whole lot in profit as far as the government's concerned. You know, you ever go look at like Walmart's profit line? Walmart's profit line is always like 2, 3%, 4%. It's like bullcrap. But what they show as profit to the government is 2 or 3%. They've actually made in cash reserves that they just earmarked and shuffled around. Now, all that's caveat with, I'm not a lawyer and I'm not a tax accountant, and more importantly, I am not your lawyer and I am not your tax accountant. It is worth it to seek out a tax attorney. So, hey, make sure I'm set up for this, make sure my books are right so that I can defer all these costs. Make sure he's telling you, yes, you can do that. And then also ask him what clients do he have that fit this model that he handles. Has he done Kickstarter? Just have attorneys out there that specialize in these kind of crowdfunding things. In fact, I got all this information on a tax attorney that I interviewed on GameMark's podcast I do for indie game development. He specializes in indie game taxes work, right? He's a gamer who got a law degree and became a CPA, and he specializes in doing taxes for video game developers, right? These guys are out there, so you can find them. And it's really not going to be, you know, if you're looking for $5,000, spending $200-300 on some good advice up front is worth it. All right, come on. There we go. All right, so let's go back to rewards and talk about calculating the cost in rewards. There we go. So obvious, of course, include the cost of the reward. If a t-shirt costs $10 to print, then you should be asking more than $10 for it, right? You never like the first click. Okay. your worst case with your reward. So basically take the reward cost, divided by the reward level, times your goal. This is your worst case scenario. Because if you go down through that for each reward tier, and one of them will be the lowest number. Okay, it's going to be your most expensive reward in terms of cost, and this could be your worst case. If everybody backed it at that level, then this would be all the money I have left over. Then of course take 10% out of that too. So in this case, let's say it costs you $25 to make the reward, and you were offering it for a $50 reward, and you wanted $1,000. If everybody backed that reward, you only have $500. If you need $1,000 to actually do your project, you're not going to get that. Okay? You're going to either have to up the amount or tweak your reward levels, but you need to run your worst case. I actually spent a lot of time breaking down to do a Kickstarter because my wife does all these wonderful designs, and for a while we tried to sell t-shirts online, but I'm like, I don't want to pay $2,000 or $3,000 for a run of t-shirts that never sell, and I got a garage full of t-shirts. And every time I walk in the garage, I just see this $3,000 mistake. I'm like, well, that didn't work out. There's $3,000 I'm not getting back. So then Kickstarter comes along, and I'm like, well, a garage full of t-shirts that I didn't pay for, much better problem than one I did pay for. Okay? So I was like, all right, well, let's go do your t-shirt site. We have all these wonderful designs when we tried to cafe press it the first time, but you know, by the time you try to make money on Cafe Press, you're asking $25 a t-shirt, and that just doesn't work. And I went through the numbers, and I went to a t-shirt press here in town, so I did code stock for 5 years. I know people who print t-shirts and all that. I said, hey, this is what I want to do. And I know the quality of shirt that I want, I know the design that we want to do, and I kind of know what you're going to ask for. So, you know, I'm trying to shoot for $5,000 to $10,000. All I want to do is get the first one on t-shirts covered and the second one. So the backers help me pay for the second run of t-shirts. They get the first run of t-shirts. Now that second run of t-shirts is paid for, and then hopefully when I sell that, I can then continue to buy and build up, you know, this t-shirt thing and see if it takes off. If not, I have a garage full of t-shirts that I can give them away to people to pay anything for those t-shirts. But when I broke it down to cost numbers, I was getting into crazy territory where I was like, to do what I want to do, I'm going to have to be selling t-shirts at $3,500 and having a $20,000 Kickstarter. I'm just thinking, like, man, Woot selling t-shirts for $6. That ain't going to cut it. So we never did the Kickstarter. And then the last thing, consider reward limits. You can actually put a limit to the number of people who can claim that reward. One way, of course, is capping you in so that, like, hey, I'm only going to sell 2,000 t-shirts. I'm not going to have 30,000 t-shirts because only 2,000 people can get t-shirts and I'm limited to what I can handle. Another thing to do to reward limits is to create scarcity to create a little bit of buzz. So I said, sell your indie game for $10. Create a reward at $5 that sells the indie game, limited to the first 50 people who take it. Right? You get 50 people come in, they put in that $5, now you're no longer on zero and you're moving, so the more people will come in and back that 10. So use the reward limit feature. I don't see it used enough, but it's something you can do in there. I'm just going to show some of my favorites. I didn't update this. The dice one should be in here as well. But I will go through some of them that I've backed. The first one, Witch Girl's Book of Shadows. Guy's a comic book artist, and also he has worked on some role-playing games, tabletop type role-playing game system. So he worked on that, has some experience on that. He had a cousin. She's an 11, 12-year-old girl, and she got interested in that. He was like, there's not a lot for girls out there to play, you know? There's a lot like girls who get into D&D, but if you didn't want to get into the fantasy D&D world set, there's nothing out there. It's all mechs, it's all that. So he basically came up with Witch Girls. He did like a comic and thing like that in some background, but he got a tabletop role-playing game called Witch Girl's Book of Shadows to do this role-playing game. I still haven't gotten that yet. That one still hasn't shipped, and I backed that a while ago. When did that end? May 10th of last year. So that's one. And he's constantly updating. You know, he's had to switch publishers. Artwork came back wrong. You know, he did get quite well funded though. Asked for $2,000, got $8,000. So Again, I have $3. I thought that'd be great to have this tabletop role-playing game. You might be interested. Again, I just also like the idea of like looking at an area. This isn't covered. This isn't going to happen. Wizards of the Coast is probably looking at it going like it's not worth the effort to put it out here to print the books. So the next one that's up here I back is the Math Girls comic. Now I've read this book. This is a book that was published in Japan. It's actually now 7 books, an anime, a manga series, all around this. So this woman, she got a PhD in mathematics in Japan, and then got a job animating comics and anime, right? So that's what she's doing, not working in her degree, but she's always fascinated with math. So on the side, she started up a book and a comic of these girls going to school. And it's a typical, if you watch anime, there's a whole genre of anime that is the high school drama romance anime. So that's what this is. This is high school, this is teen romance, except when the kids get around the table, they're throwing back and forth at each other equations and questioning whether, geometry is really correct and Euclid knows what he's talking about and things like that. And it gets deep and crazy. And it's really novel the way she does it, because she sets up one boy who is distraught over 2 girls. One girl is in his class of his age group. She's much smarter than he is. The other girl is in the class behind him, struggling with math. And it's genius because he goes into the one session and gets in over his head with the one girl, but when he catches up with the other girl, they kind of circle back around and revisit, and they kind of he re-explains the concept that was going on to that. There's an awesome section on sine and cosine, and what they do with sine and cosine, and break it down in ways that you just don't think of it when you just see it as a mathematical function, or you see it plotted out as a wave. Like, just to take it back to like, no, it's really talking about a circle here. And it's really talking about a revolution and an oscillation, and where that can go in different directions. I really enjoyed the book. So I backed the comic here. They sent me for backing a hard copy of the book, translated, the first edition translated over, and they are busy at work laying out the first comic that is based on the first book. It's not easy just translating the words, because it has to be drawn comic book style, manga art style, has to fit within the shells. They have to do some scans in of stuff and redraw stuff and all that. But the people who do this, bento books, that's what they specialize in. So I thought that was really awesome. Something we don't have much of in the U.S., a cool math. Math is awesome, math is cool type thing. It's not coming from like the VHS player in the school when they wheel the card out. Like, oh, watch the math is cool tape. No, it's like, no, generally, in Japan you can have math is just cool. It's a little bit different culture over there, and bringing that over I thought was good. The last one, I backed it, I put this up here, and I backed it before this ever became a controversial project. And I actually followed Feminist Frequency, is the name of her blog. And she's FemFreak on YouTube. And I watched a couple of them, and she basically breaks down stereotypes and tropes of women in movies, is what a lot of her stuff started out, but going through it. And it's not, she's not even in there as, oh, this is evil or this is wrong. It's like, okay, we're talking about this movie, now this is a trope, this is a stereotype, and we'll line up all the other movies that use this trope, okay? And I liked it, one, from an activism standpoint, but two, from a writing standpoint, from somebody who wants to make engaging, telling stories in games. You need to know about the tropes so that you can either use or not use them knowingly. Sometimes you use a trope to set somebody up for an expectation that you then switch out underneath them, right? Sometimes, you just want a trope because a trope immediately gives you a background for a character, and you don't have to, explain away the quirky scientist guy. Because here are the key telling signs of a quirky scientist, so I'll put the key signs in, he's a minor character, you get it, you can move on, and I don't have to put a lot of backstory. So there's advantages and disadvantages of tropes, and she goes on. The one that always put me on, the one that I remember that put me over the top with her was the Bechdel test. Now, when I hit subscribe, and I'm reading her blog, and I found it. I didn't know about the Bechdel test. But Bechdel is a woman It was a feminist, and she wrote basically this test for measuring Hollywood's progress towards women. And all you do is you take all the major Hollywood releases for the year, you go through all the videos, all the movies, and you ask yourself, was there 2 women in the movie? Did they both have names? Okay, one was not just store clerk A. Did they have a conversation with each other about something other than a man? That's it. You pass if you can meet those, and 97% of Hollywood movies still fail the Bechdel test, right? And that got me to think of like, wait a minute, because there's an inherent mistake I could make because it's not my perspective. And how would I write dialogue of 2 women when I'm never around in that moment? I now have to go off and do research. I have to go read books I wouldn't normally read, ask people questions I normally wouldn't think of, but it got me thinking of like, you're right, I would very easily, think I was doing a good female in my game. She's the only female, and she's talking to all guys, And it's like, oh, wait a minute, yeah, you're right, I would fail the Bechdel test. So she talked about the Bechdel test, and that's what I backed her. This project is to do that same kind of analysis of tropes, but take it to video games. So she's played a lot of video games, she talked, she knows all these video games. What did she initially ask for? $6,000. She wanted to buy some new cameras, okay? New camera equipment to do this, but also, she's got to buy a video game. So I'm going to sit down, she's going to play the video game, she's going to come up with a list, or these are what the tropes will be, I'll put them in there, like saving the princess is a trope. The male hero in a female body is a trope in video games, which like all I've done is swap it. You could put a guy in that role or a female in that role. There's nothing in that character that does any gender definition, right? All that. So she's going to go through, and again, she's not coming out of it as this is bad, this is evil, this is change. Of course she wants change. Of course she's trying to affect change. But the videos themselves are really kind of cool to watch individually and kind of just see how these tropes play out, right? And see how these stereotypes are used. Some you know of, some you may like, oh wow, I didn't realize. Like the woman in the refrigerator. This is actually a comic book trope. But it is the dead female character to empower the male character's story. And there's a married, I don't know if it was a Fantastic Four, I forget the comic. And he was married. They were both scientists, they were both doctors, they were both superheroes. And there's a comic where they wanted to take it dark and more interesting. So he comes home and finds that she's been murdered and stuffed in the refrigerator. And it's like, okay, all of her smarts, her superpowers, her nothing, are all gone in that instant for a bullet point and a background now of the male character. Like, oh, he's got, troubled wife, type thing. And that was one that I was like, wow, I didn't really think of that. But then when she starts going through and starts showing you all these really strong female characters that just die. And then the guy is like, avenging them now or something like that. And it's like, yeah, you guys didn't really put any background into that. And, they can still die, that can still happen tragically, but don't just have them wound up in the refrigerator, Anyway, so she did this trope thing, and the video game culture is way behind in terms of any other culture given as far as sexism. It is far worse. The numbers I saw last week was 11% of game designers are female, 3% of game programmers are female. That's how back we're talking, all right? So you go in IT and you talk like 30%, we ain't even there yet. That's 10 times better than your IT problems, okay? And there was a huge negative backlash that started. He said, oh, there's nothing wrong with video games, and how dare she do this? Of course, there were a lot of people like me of like, whoa, stop, no, there's a very clear problem here, and she's going to explore it. She didn't say it was wrong, she didn't say it was right, she said she's going to make some videos exploring it. She hasn't even said anything yet. Technically, she hasn't done anything yet. And she didn't take money from you. I gave it, so it's no harm, no foul. But then, because of that negative backlash, that spurred her from $6,000 to $158,000 that she went. Which then, of course, got a lot of that was good that it got that high because there were denial of service attacks on our websites, and there were comment bombs on our YouTube videos, and it got horribly nasty. If you ever go up and you look for Anita Scarcesian or tropes versus women in video games, you can kind of see that. This winds up with a great story, though. She gave a TED Talk. Ted brought her down there, and she gave the talk of what it's like to stand up to this level of hatred, and shared some of those vile things that you can imagine that got sent to her. And she's not a very big woman. You can see her very visibly shaken on stage, like having to recount those things. But the courage she had to go up there and just say, like, I have to talk about it, because if I don't, then the other side wins on that, trying to silence her. You can obviously see, I've got 3 daughters, right? So you can see I have a certain weakness on Kickstarter that I'll back. That pretty much is the talk. I just threw up some slides of the technology cooperative.
What did she do with the extra money?
What's that?
What did she do with the stretch goals?
The stretch goals added more videos.
Okay.
Okay, we'll cover, like, you know, the princess trope, right, in video games, and then it's like, okay, now we're going to analyze, like, these 3 other tropes that I planned on doing 10 videos to start with, and then we added more and more to that.
So was this a Kickstarter more for just research, or did somebody, did people get things out of it?
What's that?
Was this more of just a Kickstarter for the research that she was doing?
Yeah, it was the idea of her doing the research. She hadn't made any videos yet about video games.
So were there incentives for people to get?
There were some levels, and I think there was some, like, stickers and things and t-shirts. I don't have the page up here where I can scroll down and see if I backed at any reward level. I may have just backed this one to get the money, buy some cameras, buy the video games, and you can do the project. I don't remember getting anything.
So it is possible to get Kickstarter for just more like research type thing. So
Yes, there have been a few research style projects go on Kickstarter and get done, and if they get the right amount. And again, she was only asking for $6,000.
right.
And you know, this is the extreme outlier of where that may go. But yeah, if you're going to do some research and then you're going to put that research up on YouTube and make it publicly available, I think you could do okay there. I think, you know, even though it's not technically consumer focused, if you're going to research something that's not getting a lot of coverage and it has interest, then that could be a successful Kickstarter project. And I do know at one point there was artwork done on here, and it wasn't a sticker. And I told her, like, if you make those stickers, I would buy hundreds of them. Because there was like a female. There was Princess Zelda in, like, holding, like, the Link shield and Master Sword, and the caption was like, "I got this, boys." And I'm like, if you get that, that's going on my laptop, it's going on my guitar case. Can we print that sticker? But she held off printing the stickers because there's obviously a copyright question that could come up, and you know, you don't want to have your Kickstarter like, okay, we also need $80,000 to defend the fair use lawsuit that originated. By the way, if you do a Kickstarter, make sure you are doing an original Kickstarter. DMCA applies, takedowns apply. Kickstarter will honor those in a heartbeat. They will take down projects and start refunding funds or asking you to refund funds even after it closed. There have been some projects that got through and they got high into funding and they were successful, and then Kickstarter locked and held the money because there was questions about it. I think one of the big ones was OCR Remix. Like, they take classic NES songs and they do new versions of them, and it's kind of a site sharing. And yeah, they're using copyrighted material, but it's kind of like, yeah, whatever, it's a fan forum, and we're not going to go sue the fans. They went to Kickstarter and said, hey, we're going to make CDs. And then Square said, yeah, we own all the music to Final Fantasy, so no, you will not make CDs and sell them, even if you say you're selling them at no profit. You're making a CD and you're selling it with our stuff, and that's where we get involved. And I've seen a good number of Kickstarters, because I track them so heavily. I'll get an alert in my database of like, this link's gone, and I'll go and I'll check it out and find out that, oh, yeah, these guys were an obvious IP violation, so be careful there.
How long does it take for Kickstarter to run the funds?
From what I've read in blog posts and updates, it can be anywhere from 15 to 30 days to kind of get that through. Yeah, it's fairly quick. It's fairly quick. I think they answer that in their FAQ, or they tell you something like when you're setting up reward tiers, understand to allow yourself a month before we release the funds to you. depending on how you set up your account and how high you got funded, if you opted to have Kickstarter send the money to a PayPal account, then PayPal could get nervous. You know, you raised $60,000, and then that $60,000 check went from Kickstarter to your PayPal account, and PayPal went, whoa, we're going to investigate that, and you could be delayed on PayPal. If you set up a direct bank account, then you probably won't have that happen. Anybody else?
You did a great job of identifying this is the segment that gets funded most. Have you did any research into like 2x and 3x? I mean, as far as what the typical project is that makes 2 or 3 times their funding?
No, I haven't played down with that. There's a couple other questions with that data set that I kind of want to play with when I have time. Of just going down there and trying to tease and find out. Like one thing I've been playing with, and I've been playing with different methods of analysis, even answer the question, is there a particular type of backer? Like I know I'm a particular type of backer. And there are certain things, unfortunately it's hard to quantify in a data set, but there are certain things a project will have, such as, you know, a positive female role model for my daughters that will tend to get me to back. And I just start to wonder, like, okay, is there a video game guy on Kickstarter who's backing video games? Or does the video game backers also back the technology projects, and there's a high overlap? Or, you know, do the people who back music like to back board games? You know, and some of these you may not be able to do a whole lot with, but some of those you might be able to do a whole lot with. You might be able to say like, okay, well, if these are appealing to 2 communities, the same person is in both communities, then you can kind of pitch your product understanding that there might be 2 reasons somebody's backing this project, right? Because the person who backs it because they love role-playing games backs it for one reason. The person who's a music enthusiast might be backing it for something completely different, but there's an overlap, and understanding that might be key. Like I said, I've been still playing with like how do I even take the data set that I've got and tease that data out. I've gone a couple different. My DevLink talk last year was actually on like work in progress, showing where I was at so far on there.
I was curious if you had attempted to apply any of the metrics you were demonstrating early in predictively to see if the correlation, you know, holds true.
No, but there is a site called Kicktraq, Kicktraq, which does have a predicted funding level projection for projects. Now, what he's using behind the scenes for his numbers, I don't know. I know he has one that's horrible, that's just a linear projection, and that's awful because like from day 1 to day 2, there's a high amount of activity, and it seems like he tracks something I don't track though. He tracks daily progress. And I don't have that in my database. I don't have a daily progress chart. But looking at his charts, there's definitely a strong start, and a quiet middle, and a strong finish with a lot of projects. So having just a linear projection off the beginning is an awful fit for that curve. But he's got some other curves, and it's starting to get accurate with that. So he may have some like that. That would be interesting. You take those and say, oh, well, you lined up with these parameters. Here's an odds of success. At some point, though, I want to make my projects put on Kickstarter. Anybody that wants a database, shoot me an email, and I'll send you a link. My caveat always is that, like, if you find something, you just share it. And I don't mean with me, like, blog it, post it somewhere, just share it. I do that because I tried to collaborate. There were some other articles that were doing Kickstarter analysis, and I was like, hey, that's great. We should compare notes because I'm trying to whittle down these last, projects. At that time it was like 50,000. I was looking for 5,000 projects to whittle down. And through the emails, realized I had captured more products. I had screen scraped more products than they had. But they didn't want to share, and they were working on some top secret data analysis, that was going to be their follow-up, and they wanted to keep it all closed. And there was this academia PhD guy in there, and I'm sure he saw some paper being published with his name on it or something like that. And that just put a real sour taste in my mouth of like, this is public data, and all you've done is screen scrape it, right? I'm not saying you have to give your analysis away. I'm just saying, like, you added the data set, you work with the data set and all that, that you just like, hey, the data set you don't like, it's kind of open source, just keep it open. And so in reply to that, that's actually when I went to my post and posted all my numbers on my blog. And said, if you want the database, you can just ask for it. But you have to share and share alike, because I didn't want that group to come back and ask for it. Like, oh, well, since you're giving it away, give it to us. No, you're not going to give me yours. So, and again, I thought it was ridiculous because all I wanted was a list of URLs. Just give me your list of unique URLs, and I can match them against mine. I'll give you back the delta, and then we can fill out our database. I actually didn't want to download their whole database. And that's why I put that in there. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you for coming out. 100 people.
Awesome.